You're listening to Free Mama Radio, where we believe you can have both a successful business and show up as the mom you want to be. I'm your host, Lauren Golden, a mom who built a full-time income working part-time hours. Now, I help other moms like you learn how to work from home on your own terms, take control of your schedule, and make more money so you can live a totally awesome, guilt-free life. I am on a mission to make sure that no mother has to choose between family and financial stability. So if you've been wondering, can I really have it all? This podcast will give you the answers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Free Mama Radio. I'm here with one of my nearest and dearest. And because we are all about transparency at the Free Mama, this is the second time I have forced her to do this interview because the Zoom video broke down the first time. So we truly love and are grateful for the one and only Miss Abbi Perets. And she wants moms to know that they don't have to choose between kids and career. She's the coach and mentor moms turn to when they want to break into freelance writing and earn great money from home on their own terms. She has a combined 20 years experience freelancing for some of the world's biggest companies with firsthand knowledge of having 5 kids of her own, including one with special needs. And in fact, I'm going to back up for a second to some of the world's biggest freelancing companies. I'm pretty sure that my husband has actually come in before and been like, would I be seeing like Abby's face on Upwork? And I'm like, yeah, probably, because she's spoken for their company. So yeah, that probably was Abby's face. So she's the real deal. She understands the unique challenges moms face every day and has created programs specifically tailored to meet those challenges and empower moms all over the world to have it all. Needless to say, she shares the mission of the Free Mama. She's one of my dearest friends. She's the copywriter on Team Mama. Abbi, welcome to Free Mama Radio ×2.
Thank you so much for having me back on the show. This is so exciting. I can just pretend this is like our sequel episode, you know?
I know, except the good news is, well, maybe it's not good news for you, but the truth is that we're going to have to backtrack because even though I got to hear this interview once before, it is lost in the Zoom cloud. And so we need to make sure we bring it all back out so that all the Free Mamas can enjoy this.
All the goodness. It's all somewhere floating in the Zoom something.
It is. It is. So let's take it back. I think the first time we had this conversation was actually probably about 3 years ago. If my memory serves me, I think maybe a little more, maybe closer to 3.5, but probably around 3 years is how long we've known each other. But your business goes back way further than that. So let's talk about, how did you get started in freelance writing? Did you know you were going to be a writer? Did you go to school to become a writer? Like, were you just predisposed to this beautiful online internet career in copywriting? Or was this
not even a little bit? I was always creative and I always loved writing. I'm going to say, like, in many ways, an inherently lazy person. So like I look for ways to do what I want to do and not what anybody else is looking for me to do. And my path was definitely not a traditional one. So when I was 16, I finished high school early because Pennsylvania state law had some weird stuff going on. I needed 4 years of gym, but only 3 years of math and science. And I managed to like figure out some loopholes and get that done. So I went off to college to study theater arts. And so that my father could pay like $30,000 a year so that I could go wait tables in New York City. But then when I was 18 years old, I dropped out of college and moved to Israel to join the Israeli army, at which point my parents were like, actually, we love the theater. We think theater is a great life choice. And I was like, well, too late. I'm doing something else now. So I moved to Israel. I joined the Israeli army. I met my husband. I got married. And I started working in this little agency in Tel Aviv that wrote in English, like for Israeli companies that needed an English presentation for the world. And like, they hired me because I spoke English and I knew how to use a computer. It wasn't like I had any stellar skills. Remember, I had dropped out of college. And so I worked for them for a little bit and they would bring me things and they'd be like, here, write about it. And I would ask really probing questions like, what should I say about it? And they would tell me. And then I would write it. It was great. And then I got pregnant with my first baby. And I had this dream where like, and truly, like when I look back on young Abby, I'm like, oh, you're so cute. I thought that
Aren't we all?
I know, right? I thought that I would bring my baby into the office and she would sit calmly at my feet in her little car seat and like coo while I worked. And then like I had the baby and I was like, oh yeah, that's not going to happen. So I called them and I was like, yeah, I'm not coming back. And so I was like, well, now I'm a freelance writer. And I had no idea what that was, who was going to pay me, what exactly I was going to do, like zero preparation whatsoever, but an insane desire to wear elastic waisted pants and be on my couch and watch my little girl like grow molecule by molecule. You know, like when it's your first baby and like you notice every little thing, you're like, oh my God, yesterday you only had 7 eyelashes and now you have 8. Like, wow. So yeah, that was what I wanted to do with my life. So that is how I became a freelance writer. So if anyone was hoping for some great inspiring story of like, oh, I always knew it. No, not at all.
No, but this is so much better. This is so much better. Okay. You touched on something I want to come back to in just a moment. But before we do, let's talk about those early days of being a freelance writer. You kind of said like, you didn't even know what that meant. You just kind of declared it. And then the imperfect path followed. And first of all, that's a teaching moment for our free mamas here just in and of itself, right? So many people come into the Facebook group. I know you, Abby, have your Facebook group as well. And we'll tell everybody how to connect with you at the end. It's one of the first and only questions I get. It's like, how do I get started and how do I find clients? And then once people actually start getting started and finding clients, then they have more substantial questions. But it always starts with, how do I get started? And sometimes, not so sarcastically, my answer is, well, you start by saying that you're a virtual assistant, or you start by saying that you're a copywriter. And that's really what you did. So what came next once you declared, I'm at home with my beautiful 8 eyelashed daughter and I am now a freelance writer?
By the way, in a true moment of like life is totally unfair, my sons, I have 5 kids, 3 boys and 2 girls. My sons all got lush eyelashes from my husband's side of the family, and my poor daughter's got mine. So she still has like 8 eyelashes.
But I think that that's like a universal truth, because Henry has eyelashes for days, and my girls, I'm like, oh, you're gonna want mascara in like 4th grade.
So unfair.
Not happening, by the way.
Yeah, right. No. So this was, okay, I'm, old. I'm 44. So when I had my first baby when I was 23, it was 1999 and the internet was a fairly new thing. So websites were not like so amazingly prevalent. We didn't have Google. We had Alta Vista for a search engine, and people didn't get thousands of emails a day. You got like 7, and email was exciting to people. So I went to these parenting websites because I figured I am now an expert. I have had an entire human baby.
With 8 eyelashes.
Right, with 8 eyelashes. So I know everything there is to know about this topic. It's amazing to me now. Like when I look back, I'm like, wow, you were kind of brave and cool. So I pitched these websites where I was reading articles. I was like, this is not so difficult. There's a formula to these articles and the way they're written. I can do this. Like I see they open with a quote from somebody, and then there's a little bit of a story, and then there's an expert. But like there was definitely a formula to the way these articles were written, and it was not difficult to follow and pick out and see. So I literally sent email to these people saying, I have a year of experience as a junior copywriter in Tel Aviv and I have a baby. So obviously I know about that. So can I write articles for you? And that was pretty much what I wrote to them. So my very first freelance assignment paid $25, but it was like someone paid me to write something. So it was really exciting. It wasn't a tremendous amount of money. I put in an enormous amount of work, but my name went up on that article, on that website, and it gave me the confidence to then pitch more things to other places.
Oh, it's so good. Okay. So you mentioned the word brave, and you said brave and cool. I look back and I was kind of brave and cool. And every time I talk to you, Abby, I just realize how much we have in common, even though we also obviously have a lot of differences in our journey and our families and whatever. But these little nuggets, these little these I think become universal truths of those who make it to that next step and who make it to that next level, right? And brave and cool. I can look back on a lot of stories in my life and I'm like, wow, that was really brave and cool. I'm not sure I would do that now, but I'd like to think I would still, because that was still me then. And I'm like, kind of a better version of myself, hopefully today than I was then, but that was brave and cool. And I think, again, like, I'm just going to, for anybody who does not feel like this is obvious, I want to pluck this out. Like we talk about, you don't have to be super confident to get started, but you do have to be kind of brave and cool. Like you kind of got to put yourself out there a little bit and have the courage to just get started and ask for that experience or for that first client or for whatever. And then that's where the experience and confidence comes from, like Abby shared. So back earlier, you were talking about with your very first job in Tel Aviv, how you would get this assignment and then you would ask questions and then they would tell you what to do. And I hear you talk about this when you teach now your students about copywriting. And then you also mentioned, as you were reading these blogs early on, you noticed this formula. How has this shaped your career as a copywriter, both as a writer, but also when it comes to where you are now, where you actually teach other women how to become really good copywriters? How did you catch on to this? And how does asking questions and following this formula play a role in your success?
Yeah, I think it's the key, really. One of the big things that I teach is if you want to be a writer, one, you have to care about people, and two, you have to be okay with asking a lot of questions. You just keep asking questions until you have all the information you need. I will literally say to clients at times, particularly in the past when I was writing more about technical things that I didn't have a background in at all, I would say to them, okay, pretend it's Thanksgiving and Aunt Mary sits down next to you and says, so what do you do again? So explain it to me like I'm Aunt Mary. And my clients have never minded that, because when we're writing material that's meant to be read by ordinary consumers, guess what? They also don't know about, bandwidth issues in managed IT services, right? But like if you're the guy who needs to convince your boss to buy those things, you need to be able to explain them in human terms. So it's really about asking questions. That's always been key. And finding formulas for me in writing is something that I've always been able to do that, to kind of pick that out. But once you know that the formula is there, and once you've been shown what to look for, it's a skill that can be learned. Like to me, it was something that came very naturally, but now it's something that I teach other people, how to look at a piece of writing and figure out, what did they do here? What was step one? What was step two? And when you know, hey, they're just a bunch of steps that I can follow and I can create a result like this, that's awesome. That means, as long as writing is something that you like and enjoy and it's not like painful for you, that you can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you work with a lot of moms also, obviously. I'm just thinking from my own experience, and I know a lot of free mamas are also moms writing for money, right? Like that's what they're doing. And do you ever come up with people who have issues with asking questions or have mind blocks around it? I know in my experience, a lot of people are fearful of asking questions because they think it makes them look like they don't know enough.
Right. So one of the things that I learned early on and that I still teach today is I'll say something like, okay, well, obviously I've read about what you do and whatever, but I just want to hear it from you. Tell me in your own words. Like, even if I have no clue, I don't necessarily want to look like an idiot. I'm not afraid of asking a lot of questions, but there are times when you're like, I'd like to look like I'm a little more prepared than I am, right? So you preface it with, I want to hear you talk about it. I want to hear the language you use, which is completely legitimate because you do want to hear that. So that's something. People are sometimes afraid to ask questions, and you have to push past that. It's one of those things where the client is certainly not going to think less of you for asking questions. The client will be much more upset if you're like, yeah, I'm not going to ask any questions because I figure I can do this. I've got enough. I'll just pull it out of my head. And then you wind up having to send a whole bunch of email, get more information, or schedule another call. And depending on the kind of clients you're working with, there may be multiple people involved. So to get all of those people back on a call again could be like a logistical nightmare for someone. So they would much rather have you ask all the questions at the beginning. And that's really how I preface things when I'm talking to clients. Like, this is going to take us about this long because I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions so that I have everything that I need to move forward.
Okay, so you mentioned you have 5 kids. I obviously know quite a bit about you and your family and your story. But for people who are brand new to you, a lot of us go into business and we want it to be this like uphill, like ascension of profit and growth and this beautiful trajectory, but it doesn't always go that way. I would say more often than not, it does not. And you actually took a brief hiatus in your self-proclaimed freelance writing career, and then had to. Well, you didn't have to. You chose to bounce back. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about that? Because I think it's a huge part of obviously who you are in your journey, but also I would say I think that experience is who has made you who you are today in the way that you're able to serve other women.
100%. So I'm a writer, so let me set the scene for you. Imagine that it's pouring down rain now because we're in the sad part of the story. So, so I started this business. I started writing, and I had all these babies. And my third son, my third child, my first son, was born a little bit early, and we quickly discovered there was definitely an issue. Nobody could quite put their finger on what the issue was. It took until he was 2 years old for him to be diagnosed with a rare genetic syndrome. And I had to learn that genetic does not mean hereditary. And it was like this whole education thing. So I then joined the whole world of special needs parenting and, physical therapy and speech therapy and occupational therapy. And it took me a long time to get okay with that, like to just stop feeling, I'm going to say, anger and rage all the time that I carried around inside. It took me like many, many years to get past that. Right at the time I got past that, that same kid was diagnosed with leukemia. And that's when I shut everything down. So that was 2013. I had 5 kids at that point. My youngest, by the way, was born with only 1 ear. And in our house, we're like, yeah, that's not real special needs. Suck it up. So that's who we are as people. Like, that's who we've been made into. But now I had this kid with leukemia and special needs and 4 other kids at home. And the youngest was only like 3 years old. So that was a freaking nightmare, I think is the technical term that we assign to that. And I fell apart completely, except that you don't get to fall apart when your kid has cancer. So like you keep it together on the outside. And I would literally, when I would drive to the hospital in the morning, I would scream in my car. I would play the loudest heavy metal that I could, and I would scream in my car. My husband did nights at the hospital and I did days. So I also never saw, like, we saw each other from the handoff. Like, we were like nurses switching shifts. Like, we would read each other the stats and whatever and pass off information. And that was it. And then when all of that finished and my son was like healthy again and back to school and routine and whatever, that's when I started Successful Freelance Mom and the business that I have now. And it definitely came from a place of, there was a lot of work that happened. I'm condensing this into, because we don't have 17 hours, which I could talk about this forever, but like I did an enormous amount of internal emotional work that I still do. And it's been years. And I got to the point where I knew that it was okay for me to have a child who lived and to want more for myself and to hold that both and in my hands, really, in my hands and in my heart and in my head, and to decide this is how I'm going to live my life. Yeah, that's definitely something that's made me who I am.
Yeah. And I feel like I got to be in friendship with you as you kind of worked through that over the last few years, especially of like, okay, I've got this business, your own writing business, but like I'm allowed to flourish. I'm allowed more than one gift from God. Like I'm allowed, and it just touches my soul so deeply, Abbi. It's just really profound. And I'm just so proud of you. I'll just tell everybody. And I tell you all the time, like, I'm just so proud of you. And I can't even imagine what it was like to walk that journey. But I know that someone listening can relate to bits and pieces of your story for sure. And so I'm glad that they know that they're not alone and that they have the ability to persevere. What was it like for you? I know you actually took time off from writing. What was it like for you to get back in, and how much, something I see people ask a lot is like, how do I stay motivated? Like, how do I get motivated? And I could go off and answer that in my own terms, but how were you motivated to get back into it, and how and why? Like, why did you get back into writing? What did that mean to you?
Yeah. So when my son was discharged from the hospital and they're like, okay, now you have a regular kid again. I'm like, wow, that's weird. So like there was definitely all this emotional turmoil and things. And still, I was not all there. So I wasn't motivated at first. I would get everybody out the door in the morning and then I would sit on my kitchen floor and cry. And, like the more put together you are on the outside, the more you're falling apart on the inside, that whole bit, right? Like that was totally me. And it had been 3 years that I hadn't worked. And I'd never had that in my life ever. So it was weird. And we had managed just fine on my husband's income. We had some insurance that helped us, and that was, very useful. So I didn't feel like I really needed to do anything at first, but clearly I needed something beyond what I was doing. Like the crying on my kitchen floor was not helping anybody. I was in a Facebook group for moms of kids with cancer because there really is a Facebook group for everything. And I was lucky enough to be living in Israel at the time, where we have socialized medicine. So all of my son's care was completely covered. We paid $0, and my son was hospitalized, emergency surgeries, incredible amounts of medication, whatever. But people in the United States, I don't know if you've heard about healthcare in the US, it's not great. And so it costs a lot when you have a kid who's sick, and people lose their homes over things like this. So I was in this Facebook group and I was listening to these moms talk about how, they really had to make choices like electric or food. And I started sharing some information. Hey, do you know the other thing? Like, because when you have a kid with cancer, even when the kid recovers, they don't go back to a full-time school schedule immediately. There's still a lot of doctor's appointments. There's tiredness and weakness, so they're missing time. It's not conducive to having a regular 9-to-5 job. So I started sharing some information with these women, like, hey, there are things that you can do from home that you could get paid for. Like, I could show you how to do some of these things. And it was really informal. It was me emailing a group of, it started with like 5 women. And I was emailing them once a week, like with a little lesson that I had written up and like some to-dos and, email me back with questions. And this was, maybe Zoom existed, but I certainly didn't know about it back then. So there were no Zoom calls or anything. It was just email. But these women started getting results and they were posting like, look, I made $500 doing this thing. Like, I can go buy groceries. I can keep the lights on. I can do these things. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, that's something. So that was a reason to get up off the kitchen floor. And that, I think, going outside of myself and my own needs and being able to see where I could be helping other people was definitely a motivator for me. Like, I had a reason to show up at my desk because there were people counting on me for the next lesson. So that's how it really started. And then I started thinking, I could formalize this. I could do something with this. I could reach more moms. I could reach moms of kids with special needs who, like me, spend a lot of time sitting in waiting rooms while your kid is in therapy, who don't have the luxury, let's say, of maintaining a regular 9-to-5 job because you have a kid whose schedule demands other things. So really that's where it came from. And I would never say it's confused. Like, I'm not grateful to cancer because no, but there were some good things that came out of that terrible and dark time. Same with coronavirus. Like, I'm certainly not grateful to coronavirus, but I really have liked being at home with my kids during this time and seeing the world differently and that kind of thing. So I've made a conscious decision since my son was sick and recovered to actively seek out joy, to actively find the things that make me happy, and to find the reasons to celebrate and to be happy. So there you go.
Oh, so beautiful. You are such an inspiration to me. And I know everybody listening now is in love with you too. And you're also one heck of a writer. So something that I ask everybody on Free Mama Radio is to bring 3 tips in their area of expertise. So for anybody who's listening, who's like, I like writing, I think I could start asking really good questions. I like following a formula. How do they get started? What are 3 tips that you teach people interested in becoming a freelance writer?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would do would be find literally just an hour a day. Find an hour a day that's yours that you can carve out in your life, because you're going to need that. If you want to start any kind of business, you've really got to have a bare minimum of 7 to 10 hours in a week. So get really creative. If you have to get up early or stay up late or work something out with your partner on the weekends, figure out where is that hour a day, hour and a half a day, whatever, coming from, so that you have that 7 to 10 hours to get started. The next thing that I would say to do is to create a writing habit. Now, the worst way to create a writing habit is to say, I'm going to write 1,000 words every morning. Like, your brain hears that and is like, oh, no, you're not.
Hard.
It just shuts down. It's like, yeah, no, you really need to be alphabetizing your spices right now. So instead, in order to create that writing habit, start with something really small, like I'm going to write 1 sentence today. And it can be a sentence about anything. It does not have to be business related, but I'm going to write 1 sentence today about, something that makes me happy or something that makes me angry, or the fact that I can't think of a sentence to write, whatever it is, but start with 1 sentence and see what happens from there. Like, let that habit grow into something better. And step 3 would be to start thinking about what kinds of things do you want to write and who do you want to write them for? It's like another way of saying you're going to have to niche down eventually. I know you hear this a lot, but it really is true. But start thinking, start looking literally at everything written that comes into your home, every brochure, every piece of junk mail, every magazine, every book, every letter that comes into your home was written by someone who got paid to write that thing. And that person may well have been a freelance writer. And there's no reason that that freelance writer can't be you.
So good. Oh, I am just so excited. You guys, if you have goosebumps like I do listening to Abbi, you need to know that she is one of our Skills Lab speakers at the upcoming Free Mama Live. So make sure you guys jump on that. Before we say goodbye to Abbi, 2 last questions. Number 1, where's your favorite place for people to connect with you? If somebody's interested, they want to follow you, they want to download something, where do we need to send them?
Yeah, come to the website, come to successfulfreelancemom.com because all of the links are there and it's so easy to find everything that you need.
Perfect. And we will, as always, put that in the show notes over on freemamaradio.com as well as Abbi's got a great Facebook group and all kinds of cool stuff. We'll put all that over on Free Mama Radio for you guys. Last question. The mission of the Free Mama is to make sure that no mother has to choose between family and financial stability. Knowing who's listening today, which obviously is very similar to who you love to serve, we love our mamas. What's one final piece of advice for these women who are listening today that maybe you didn't already get to share on today's interview?
Oh my goodness. Okay. You kind of did hear it, but I'm going to say it again because it really matters to me. I'm going to say choose joy. I'm going to say sometimes there are dark times and you have to actively go after the joy and like seek it out and tease it out from whatever situation you're in. So do that because I've done depressed and miserable and it's not nearly as much fun as choosing joy. So you can choose joy in really small ways if you have to. Like sometimes joy can be drinking my coffee while wearing noise canceling headphones. Sometimes joy can be an extra moment with the door locked in the bathroom, just an extra moment to breathe or an extra moment out in my car before I come into the house. Find and choose joy, even in the smallest ways possible.
I love it. Abbi, I love you so much. Thank you for coming on Free Mama Radio. You are fantastic.
Oh, back at you. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Free Mama Radio. Don't forget to check out Free Mama TV right here on YouTube for hundreds of how-to videos and interviews to help you start, grow, and scale a virtual business from home. If you want to join a community of tens of thousands of moms just like you, make sure you join the Free Mama Movement group over on Facebook. And lastly, if you want to learn more about how we can do this together, work to achieve your goals, and make you our next success story, check out my free training at thefreemamamovement.com. I'll see you next time.